So just the level set, I keep mentioning, like, it's census global scale. We have so much data, but like, how much data can we actually analyze? So in total, before we did anything, we looked at 4 billion hashing. It was 4 billion, just under 4 billion, 2.9 billion. We're involved in 2.6 billion and postal languages. Now, we deduct that down to 792 million distinct hash email addresses and 133 million unique postal addresses. And then when we look at the combinations between those unique sets, that's where we get those 1.2 billion, which is where the pairs. And we estimate that over 90% of U.S. census coverage you got from that percent. To make this really concrete, what this means is that in the data we analyze, a postal address corresponded to 9.1 email addresses, and an email address corresponded to 1.6 postal addresses. On average, these are averages. So now if I went scale, let's talk about accuracy. Our first finding from analyzing those accuracy scores on 1.2 billion record level linkages is that hanging postal linkages are accurate 20% of it. The second finding, though, was that there's a lot of variability between providers on the whole. So on the high end, the most accurate provider rates are with a 69% active on average, and the low maybe 32% accuracy. And if you work with just one provider, and you probably want to know if your provider is the 32 or the 69. If you multi-source, you still probably want to know if you're working with the 32 and the 69 or the 32 and the 44. So there's just a lot of variation. Finally, and interestingly, and we talked about this a lot in the talk, that scale is not predictive, does not explain the accuracy on average of a partner's file. So whatever your conclusion was coming into this, the smaller guys more accurate than the larger guys, or the larger guys more accurate than the smaller guys. We saw no evidence for either of that side, simply just does not make it. And finally, when we look at one partner's file, so there's variation between partners and variation within partners, which is maybe an obvious, not obvious, but I think an interesting conclusion. So even the least accurate provider on average and the most accurate provider on average, record by record, there's some variation. Not every record is 69% accurate. Not every record is 32% accurate. Some are nearly perfect and others are less so, and we're going to show you that distribution. So just a little bit on and off the point of the variation between providers. So here on the 0 to 100% scale, we've plotted the 32 to 69 to rate yourself of 15 providers beyond that with this. The mean across all of these partners was a 51. That's a 51% statistic. And the median was a 40 for the median the accurate provider, the median provider was accurate. Everyone scored within this on average. And then if you just hang on these further, so this little line is a box and whisker plot, and each dot, yeah, big turn for that. Okay, look at that. So box and whisker plots, not making Google Sheets, which is very annoying. But each dot is one of the 15 partners. So what we've done is we've split the 15 partners into two groups. And we're using a number of distinct chems. They send us as a proxy for size. So the group then sends us under 200 million chems and the individual providers who offer this above 200 million on bodies. What you'll notice, there's two, I think, or maybe three really important things about this chart. The first is that there's not a clean break between the providers. So we're not seeing the box plot for the smaller folks sitting over here and the largest ones over there, or vice versa. So what we're seeing is that there's considerable variation within each cohort, and it gives you ranges that spread overlaps. The second point that I want to point out is, so in the boxing whisker plot, this line here, where the dark gray becomes the light gray, that's midpoint. That's median. That's 50th percentile. Those medians are about hitting on side on top of each other. So the midpoint of the ranges are very, very similar. And scientifically, the spread in the larger group was larger than the spread in the smaller group. So that means that the most accurate provider, that's 69% accurate provider, and the least accurate provider, so again, if you even if you need to scale, you still got to validate the accuracy of this. You cannot use scales. So now what we're doing, so what we established is that there's variation between providers. Now I want to talk about the variation. So this is a graph, it's like Instagram, of each of the 1.2 billion ranges. So there's like a y-axis goes to 500 million. And here we're showing you what their accuracy score was, and we binned them by 10%. So while the average treat score, the average accuracy, all of these linkages, 51%, just under 500 million linkages are 80% linkage. That's a lot, but basically the lion's share of all the data. It's very important, though, because of this bimodal distribution. And you see perfectly bimodal this middle, but we have a bump in 0.8 and we have a bump in the 0th decile. So it means that these linkages are less than 10% likely to be accurate. So really what we're trying to show here and what we're trying to explain is that this is not a glass half empty, glass half full problem. Like we'd be like, oh my God, the data's 51% accurate, wrong half the time, all data is useless. And that's not what we want the conclusion to be. What we want the conclusion to be is that there is just varying levels of accuracy in all the data out there. No one's perfect. And what we need to start thinking about is parsing them, different data for different use cases, and parsing data into those use cases, potentially using accuracy as a proxy. So really what we're urging everyone to do is validate data before you use it. And I also have the same histogram for just one provider or anonymized gold singled them out to show that within just one provider, the bimodal trend exists as well. So I know I'm over a little bit on time. I'm going to skip through the next two slides, but my head of sales would tell me, and I mention that we are actively pursuing the next phase of this project, which is quantifying the accuracy of IP address to postal address linkages, and we are recruiting participants. So if you have this data and you want to participate in this next round of the study, please send to me or Scott McKinley, the CEO. But yeah, thank you, everybody.
We have a mega panel, not much time and lot to talk about. So let's dive straight in. Adam, give right the line of fire. You want the line of fire? I feel like it's noted that event. You have the marketing panel. There was a fight. So you've heard this study. There's a lot happening in this space. We know that identity resolution, the TV and video ad market, is critically important for the industry going forward. Give us your sense of current state of play, having listened to Catherine talk about study data stuff. Where are we in terms of building out a reliable, accurate, high-quality identity infrastructure? I like to start with
not good. It feels not good right now. This morning felt a little doomsday-ish as well, and I don't want to continue the doomsday-ish. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Adam Paul from LiveRamp.
Make a mistake, more surprising.
In the TV ecosystem, I don't know if it's that we're just all taking a closer look at things now, or if it's just that we are becoming more fragmented, or there's more identity and more data providers in the space. But in the last 6 months to a year, as we look more and more under the hood and a lot of work that we're doing with some people on the stage, you see a lot of problems. You see a lot of issues with match rates. You see a lot of when it's becoming, when we're looking at interoperability between different identity spines, we're seeing, challenges. And my hope is, and I do feel like a lot of this is driven by new measurement and new currency, where the first phase of this discussion was this all acknowledging we need something new and getting excited and, new metrics, new currencies and all that kind of stuff. I think now that we're actually doing it, the good news is we're shining a light on the problems. And my hope is, when we shine a light, we can all agree on what the problems are and we'll all come together and fix them. But I think we've shown a light on some problems right now when it comes to match rates and interoperability and all that. We are, yes. We're at an AA moment.
Emily, I suspect you have a slightly different perspective. Great, because diverse panels means more interesting conversation. Emily, what's your take?
Hi, Emily. I work at Adstra. We're an identity and data company. I think that the current state of this market is that it's really ripe for disruption. I think, as Chip coined last night, it's like we're in the beginning of The Big Short. We're bundling these like identity assets, and then we're scaling on top of that, and then backing on top of that, and we're like building this projections on projections, and that's kind of a house of cards right now. And the reason that that's happening is because our entire industry has been conditioned to value scale as like the top priority. And from the buy side, scale is really the only thing you can control. I didn't get outcomes with my 20% segment size. Okay, so next quarter, let's like bump it up to 30% and see if more people like get that prescription. It's the only thing you can control. But we have a fundamental problem in our industry that the people that sit in the middle of this, the identity resolution, traditional identity resolution companies, get paid on CPMs. So they're really motivated to scale up. And hashed email is a great example of an identifier that's used to scale an audience up, but we know that it's only accurate half the time to link a person to a household. So
an AA moment, a Jenga industry. Kate, what's your meme?
Just 1 second. So Kate Sirkin from Epsilon. My AA moment is I'm 3 years into the program, and I am 3 years. I would say
keep coming back.
yeah, well, Publicis bought Epsilon. We had not really a clue about any of this kind of stuff. Acquired a company that could help us, and it was a company that's based on people identity, and it comes from a combination of both a PII-based identity spine and a pseudonymized identity spine. And I think when you build those things together, then you start looking at what the opportunity is in the media marketplace to partner with all of these people on this panel, which we do every day. We start to crack open some of those challenges, and with the smart minds can figure out solutions to them. So 3 years in, good.
Similarly, we're about 2 years. I'm Peter from VideoAmp, 2 years into our journey to rethink identity. And how far we've come and what we can do in those 2 years really is the positive I see. We can take first-party data and forecast with high degree of accuracy, activate on it, measure, and run it all the way through attribution. And that's all powered by identity, stitching together so many different large data sets. From an improvement standpoint, I think we've got a long way to go. We're all up here talking about it, and we've got a lot of engaged faces. So I think that's a great first step. And optimizing for like what I like to call the chain of custody of how audience is passed around, the interop, redefining the conversation around match rate versus accuracy, and certainly as a measurement provider, how we optimize for that. I think that's what we're doing.
Dave?
Yeah, as the only publisher on stage, we are also about 2 years into our journey. Dave from Paramount. Like what Emily had talked about, I think we always judge these things just based on scale. Like our view of identity was just a means of transporting audiences from one place to another and ensuring that our business ran. It was about 2 years ago as we started getting into bigger currencies, more big data currencies, working with OpenAP around cross-platform measurement, that we started seeing environments that should be truly all 100% in target were coming back with results that were wildly not that. And it shined a light on the fact that, this copy of a copy of a copy over multiple different identity layers is actually fundamentally changing the end audience that you're trying to activate for your clients. So yes, Paramount still cares about scale, but we are absolutely leaning into this to try to make sure that whatever audience was built at an agency or client side is best reflected when they're activated on our side, and the measurement also reflects that same audience that got exposed within our environment.
Cool. Let's talk use cases then. So Kate, I have to say, who's an amazing sage on lots of this stuff and has been incredibly valuable as an advisor on some of the projects we've done. You consistently point out, Kate, that talking generically about identity resolution is not necessarily the best way to have a conversation. We have to think about use cases. Tell us a bit about why you think that's such an important way into this conversation.
Yeah, and I guess just look back at the headline in Ad Age yesterday about the results of this study, saying that it's half wrong. The way I would look at it, I'm always a 3/4 full person, not even just a half full person, is what can we learn about it for those use cases? The work that we do for our advertising clients around where identity is important is onboarding their data. So creating a single view of their customers, and there obviously accuracy and scale are important. Then we think about insights and analytics. So how can we bring other data sets in so we can enrich that data? And their accuracy is important, but scale goes down because when you start matching between different data sets, we see drop off. But if you have a ton of different identifiers for each person, you can then link different data sets. You can do the IP, you can do the HEMS, you can do first and third party cookies and name and addresses. So it's really important to think about that. As we get to this TV measurement, and activation side of our business, scale versus accuracy is important there. We want to reach people, but we want to manage and optimize media waste. We don't want to, as we all sit and watch connected TV, we don't want to see the same ad in every break, do we? I mean, really, as a consumer as well as an advertiser. So understanding the link of scale and accuracy there, we'd probably be a little bit more on the scale side, but we still want accuracy. But then for measurement, as you know, when we're running campaigns on a Paramount, for example, we absolutely need to see accuracy. We need to make sure that we are, you know, taking the same households who've seen the ad and making sure their performance KPI is appropriate there. I think, you know, it just makes sense to think about it like that. The business of connected television and streaming television will continue to grow, and we will continue to get better. And studies like this that Sim have done just help us all raise the bar. And it's a good thing that we're doing.
Adam, use cases, does that kind of framework make sense to you? And then to Emily, down the chain?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think based on the use case, you kind of want to dial up or dial down the accuracy of, you know, that you're concerned with. And I think I keep kind of harping on this notion of interoperability. And I do think the underlying thing that comes down to all of this is this idea of data collaboration. You know, it's data collaboration that powers targeting. It's how does my audience look against your audience as a publisher, or how does my audience look against your linear panel, or my exposure against the linear panel? And so, you know, I think that's the fundamental thing that we're all trying to deal with in terms of the use case is this element of data collaboration and which are the right identifiers between my data set and your data set that we can feel confident that we're talking to the same people at the same time.
Quick shout out to you. I found on lots of panels when we're talking about these issues, when we get to the point of talking about solutions, there are only 3 solutions we talk about: more collaboration, interoperability, or could the JIC look at it? And you've done 2 of them. So I'm just waiting for the JIC to be mentioned at some point. Let's talk a bit about, and you made this point, let's talk a bit about the different identifiers. And this is where we start to get into interesting stuff. Emily, the TruthSet study talks about email addresses, device IDs, IP addresses. There's lots of different identifiers. And it's often the case that for the kinds of use cases Kate is talking about, we're having to string together and translate between identifiers, which creates some of the challenges. Tell us a bit about how that works and how we should be thinking about making it better.
How it works typically with a traditional identity resolution company is that they'll start with like a name address match, batch that. How many more email addresses can we then batch that? So at the risk of getting too technical and boring, how Adstra does it, it's an omni-channel identity resolution. So it's kind of like this cumulative waterfall, and we weight our identity resolution by the fidelity of the identifier. So if there's one record that we're deterministically positive that that's their email, use email for that. If we're not, half the time, although Adstra is not one of those companies, but we agree, we'll use location data of the IP address to the rooftop of the household instead of the email. So there's this omni-channel way of doing this. And I think a lot of traditional like way to bump up scale is just taking a second pass at it. It's not been omni-channel. That's hard to do. So it's in the tech. It's the way that the algorithm matches it.
Peter,
Boring.
do you take an omni-channel approach or do you have a different approach?
No, we do similar. We work with 5 different identity providers in the data set. So we multi-source it. We've recently partnered with TruthSet as well to sort of, be able to give a light towards the methodologies that we're doing. For us, it's really about understanding both the use case. There may be a different use case for onboarding first-party data than there is for measuring impressions and deduplication. For us, it's understanding that, IPs are ephemeral, they churn, households churn, people get married, divorced, kids move out. All these things happen, so the household roster changes, and it's adding a temporality to our graph. But an IP from 2 months ago might be a different household than this month.
And again, one of the interesting observations, which I think you've touched upon there, that came out of the study, I felt, was that the levels of stability associated with different identifiers vary quite widely. If you're a 50-something, an empty nester, your kids have fled home, you've been in your house for 10 years, it's quite possible that some of your identifiers are very stable.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a 22-year-old and you can't afford your rent and yada, 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 it may be more problematic. Is that a sensible way to start thinking about it, that we have to think about stabilizing different groups of identifiers?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about taking more signals than just a single one. If you're just looking at IP or just looking at HEM, you might not have the same level of stability. And for a measurement company, we're always going to have a missing data problem. We're never going to get census, even for census level digital. There's always going to be a methodology and math on top of it. So doing a similar sort of histogram that, was presented, it's where can we try to identify what we believe a highly ranked or high confidence score matches here to feed into the methodology, such that our methodology can project that better than maybe injecting noise.
So Dave, as a publisher, presumably you're in an entire world of pain in trying to deal with this, because you're a widely distributed publisher. You've got a variety of channels and streaming services on MVPD platforms, CTVs, you've got logged in users, you've got non-logged in users, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you deal with trying to resolve across all of these different identity signals that you have across your footprint?
Yeah, it's not fun. So I think of it as two different things. I think the LiveRamps, the Adstras, the Epsilons of the world are using their acumen to how do you take this identity and make a single census layer that is as accurate as you could be. What I think about it from a Paramount perspective is, if we are going to run a convergent campaign for one of our clients, ultimately we need to ingest the data from one of the different partners that we may be ingesting from, and we need to pass that on.
And when you say partner, Matt, give us a sense of who that might be. For example,
that partner could either be agency holdco direct, it could be brand direct, it could be third-party data provider, it could be OpenAP. But we then have to ingest that audience into our ID framework and then distribute it to our varying endpoints, which on a normal convergent deal is some combination of national currency of your choosing, our digital freewheel ad server, and then our 5 MVPD partners that we're running set-top box addressable data within Paramount ecosystem. And each one of those has some maintenance of a crosswalk or connection that needs to be audited and maintained in an accurate way in order to make sure that audience is the right reflection of the audience getting. So, one thing we really pushed our partners to talk about is let us control the lever. Let us understand the how accurate you think this connection is, so that we ensure that we have the lever to understand, okay, we need to really just put most accurate connections here, or it's less important for this campaign, we can move it up. Those are the types of conversations we're having at the moment. And then the other aspect of that is, even though maybe outcome guarantees aren't talked about in the market as much as they used to be, outcomes are very much what Paramount is being judged by at the end of the day. How do we ensure that we are maintaining the same fidelity when exposure data is coming back through those pipelines, so that whoever is actually judging our media is getting the proper resolution of the households that were actually exposed? And if Paramount doesn't perform well, let it be just because our customers don't buy their stuff, not just because that's a household that didn't actually see the ad that we ran.
Yeah, I kind of just want to touch on that. I know, Michelle as well yesterday talked about operationalization of data. And it's hard to talk about identity for us without talking about clean rooms, because that gives us the ability to sort of operate on more raw assets, and be that offline identifiers, such that you're not maintaining crosswalks that are pseudo-anonymous and you can't make informed decisions without that signal. So I think that's really important for really getting that entire chain of custody, somewhere that's privacy-centric and operating on the same level of data, step by step.
Hey, this is an issue we've spoken about recently. Clean rooms identity are critically intertwined. given privacy and so on and so forth. But clean rooms themselves are not a mature technology at this point. We've just done some work which is going to be presented by Joanna O'Connell. Brief plug coming up. Sorry?
It's going on right now, right? In the next room.
You may be right, which is not the most brilliant scheduling, some would say. But the good news is Jan will be here during lunch and you can ask her what she found. But the two things are intertwined. The challenge, essentially, is that standing up a clean room remains complicated.
And then you've got all of the issues of bias and scalability that we've just identified in both of the SIM studies. So when you put two pieces of data in together, they're not going to be representative of the full universe. So you really need to think about what it is that you're trying to do in the clean room. How quickly can you get the data in? How quickly can you get some kind of a use case out? And what value is that going to do? It's an incredibly immature and inefficient market right now, but we all hope it'll get better. And that we've all lived through times in the media marketplace over the last 20 years when stuff has been a shit show. And it gets better eventually when people understand what can you do with the data? How can I optimize my least money at risk? And that's the way I always think about it. If I'm going to play around in a clean room, I can do it in this place, but I need to then figure out how replicable is that analytics exercise in other places, and just be smart about it. And one of the things I love about both SIM and the MRC is the transparency that it gives us into the inner workings of the industry. We just all need to stay up to date on that.
Just building on that real quick, we're seeing something I would say that is simultaneously interesting, but also a little concerning in clean rooms, which is, you mentioned operating on more raw identifiers. So people wanting to match on HEMs or device IDs or IP addresses and not necessarily resolve data for various reasons. They have more control over it. Potentially it reduces some of the costs, but you're creating that issue of disconnected data sets. I mean, the most simple example is, I have an email from an old email address that I'm using on my shopper loyalty card. My email address with Paramount Plus is my new email address. They don't know that we're the same person that's watching Paramount Plus and then purchasing in ShopRite. And so it's, because it is a nascent space, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Resolve data is key to our industry.
I have no idea what that was about.
Doesn't work.
So from a transparency point of view, one other thing to me which has come out of this study and that Emily, you and I spoke about is the fact that this structure of the industry is also not necessarily well understood. And in particular, the kind of relationships between different identity vendors and their data sets. Tell us a bit about tell us something that may surprise the audience.
Almost everyone in this study buys and sells data to and from each other.
Right.
Does that surprise anyone? There's only so many names and addresses. There's one provider of auto data and two providers of political data. And almost all of these guys share that back and forth to each other. No one knows that. Not no one. Typical layperson buyer does not know that. You also have never had a chance to be exposed to that. You've never been offered, do you want to see the linkages? You want to control it? You want to pick accuracy versus scale? So I think that probably the average buyer would be very surprised at how many data companies buy and sell to each other.
Dave, is that something that comes up in your world on a regular basis?
Yeah. So Paramount's coming out of probably about a 6-month RFP to the market, learning about all the different major identity providers in the space and understanding how they do it. And, when you put out one of those annoying questionnaires that we all hate filling out, when you read across all of them, you end up finding some interesting insights over there. There's typically 85% are the almost exact same answer, while there's a few outliers, and those outliers become somewhat interesting because when you look at stats like what Catherine talked about, if they're all wrong, are you just doubling down on that problem or not? And trying to find unique people who are thinking uniquely about how to solve for this problem. I mean, that's the type of stuff that ends up making me lean more in and see what's going on.
And can I also add the accuracy rates, 40%, 50%, that's not the same 40% and 50%. So a lot of times as a vendor, if you're doing a match test, one graph is not going to reign supreme. You probably need 2 or 3. You're going to get a census picture like by combining all these different identity solutions as well. It's not just necessarily like 40% and this person got 10 more and the 40% is overlapping. I think a lot of people think that way, and that's not how it works.
So let's talk a bit about the steps that we can take in the industry to improve transparency, improve quality, improve efficiency in this space. There were some really interesting recommendations at the back of the TruthSet report. I think Jim and Gerard are going to talk about some interesting recommendations they had, including a kind of checklist of questions that buyers should be asking their data providers. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on things that you think we could practically do to address some of the quality issues, some of the inefficiency issues that we've just been talking about. I mean, Adam, do you want to start and we'll just work our way down?
I think the major providers of identity in this space have to come together. And, you know, we're all going to have different views of who's in a household and devices to a household, devices to an individual, but we all are also going to have some data in common. And so, you know, I know this is moving us away from census and more towards a little bit of a panel mindset, but I do think if we have this group of IDs or these group of HEMs and IP addresses, device IDs that we all agree are connected to the people and are connected to the households, we at least will have a foundational data set that as different data comes in on different spines, we can feel confident that there's a subset that we could work off of as a confident group of representative IDs.
And just to be clear, when you say come together, do you mean LiveRamp is up for sale? Or do you...
How much money do you have? Yeah. If you read the trades every week, it seems we are.
I'm pretty sure not enough. Or are you thinking about some other set of arrangements?
I'm thinking, you know, some sort of collective, whether it's under the JEC, maybe? Now, I got all the trades. Under TruthSet, under, you know, some governing institution that we all have this group of data that we've all.
If we have journalists in the room, I think LiveRamp just offered to sell itself to TruthSet, which I think is a good newsworthy story in my book.
Lunch.
So that's going to take. That's all it takes. He's getting a checkbook out.
Are we off the record here, by the way?
We were until about 4 seconds ago. Now, very much on record.
It's like working a LiveRamp.
It's just in the hall. Like this was the point of the Data Collective and these studies. It was to get together and say, there's a problem. Let's figure out how severe this is and how we can move forward to make it better. We would love for LiveRamp to join the Data Collective without any ownership.
Love it. This is what we like to do. Bring everyone together. Broker deals, make no money. Emily, so you've heard Adam's view. Something that we should be thinking about as an industry to try and address some of the issues we've just been talking about.
I think a lot of brands and publishers are already thinking about taking more control of this identity resolution. A lot of brands are in-housing a spine. We're working with a lot of media companies to do the same. I think that transparency, portability of data is very key. Our entire graph and matching logic are cloud-based. The whole thing operates inside the client's environment. That's new. I think that everyone in here who works with a credit bureau to do identity resolution services can think of something that they've been told, no, you can't do. It's a business decision and a tech limitation. So that's what we're trying to disrupt, relying on non-credit-based data, permissioned, portable, privacy compliant data that like Dave can run himself. And then you're judged on outcomes and not on what this black box identity resolution company tells you someone is. You can control that yourself and fully transparent, full control.
There's a lot of innovation in this space. Kate.
2 things. I think we can get rid of, working collaboratively, the under 10% accuracy. I would like to have a list of those and be able to just share them with everybody and then like clean that piece up.
Right. So ditch the junk bond vendors.
And then the second thing is run experiments and let the ROI at the end of the campaign from a Paramount and any of the other partners that we have be the judge of what's the most accurate for your business based on those use cases.
All the great points here. I think, the collaboration, understanding is sort of that left side of the histogram, upstream would be very useful for any of us that are leveraging the data. Not to harp on clean rooms again. I know it's an immature technology, but it's the idea that you have all your data sets in one place in their original form, rather than pre-resolving one section of it and then resolving pre-resolved things in different sections, trying to get a privacy-centric view of all the assets across the entire end-to-end chain, so you can make decisions in one place.
Awesome. Dave, make your life easier.
Yeah, I mean, from a publisher perspective, and I think, we helped create some of this problem with our ask for scale. And the more we ask for questions around accuracy, I think that will help drive it. If we start making choices with the budgets we have at our disposal based on some of those rather than versus scale, like that also is a big driver of change. And then, from Paramount, we also are figuring out how to weaponize sort of our access to our own consumer data to start auditing these ourselves so that we have some insight. We can actually put people to task for things we see that are different, that we know as a truth set. You can't name a company that and not take the word, but, how do we use that to ensure that we know who's doing it best, and those who are doing it up to snuff, ask them questions around, like, how can they get better?
The meeting has just ended. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings our clean room panel to a close. Can I just say that in all seriousness, a massive thank you. We've had a lot of work going on in this space, looking at some of these issues, both with the TruthSet team, with Jim, Gerard, Alice, and Sequin Partners, and Howard and others. It's such a fascinating space. We'll definitely be doing more work. I'm hoping this panel has given us some ideas for future directions, but a huge thank you to TruthSet and to the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.